When we last left Nicholas II, the reluctant monarch was facing growing cracks in the empire he ruled. The Russo-Japanese War had ended in humiliation. The 1905 revolution had shaken the monarchy's very foundations, and Russia had entered the 20th century bruised and vulnerable. But history was not done testing Nicholas. In the years that followed, the fate of the Romanovs would take a darker turn as internal unrest, disastrous leadership, and the looming catastrophe of World War I converged to destroy the last Tsar of Russia. In the aftermath of the 1905 revolution, Nicholas II tried to project strength. The creation of the Duma, Russia's first elected parliament, was supposed to pacify the population. But Nicholas saw it not as a genuine democratic institution, but as a nuisance. He dissolved the Duma whenever it opposed him, rewriting electoral laws to ensure loyalists held power. This only deepened distrust among ordinary Russians. Reform-minded liberals were frustrated by the Tsar's stubbornness. Radical socialists, meanwhile, concluded that true change could only come through revolution, not negotiation. Nicholas clung to the belief that his authority was sacred and divinely ordained. "I will never, under any circumstances, agree to a representative form of government," he once said privately. For him, the crown was not a political position. It was a holy mission. But the cracks beneath the surface widened year by year. While Nicholas struggled politically, his private life was also a source of controversy. He and his wife, Empress Alexandra, were devoted to each other and their children. But their family faced an immense challenge. Their only son and heir, Alexei, was born with hemophilia, a disease that prevented blood from clotting properly. Hemophilia was a royal curse, carried in the bloodlines of Queen Victoria of Britain. For the Romanovs, it meant that even a small injury could be life-threatening for Alexei. The family desperately sought help, often in secret, fearful that news of the heir's illness would undermine the monarchy. It was in this environment of fear and desperation that a strange figure entered the royal court, Grigory Rasputin. Rasputin was a wandering Siberian mystic with hypnotic eyes and a reputation as a faith healer. In 1905, he was introduced to Nicholas and Alexandra. When Rasputin appeared to ease Alexei's suffering during a bleeding crisis, Alexandra became convinced he was sent by God. Soon, Rasputin became a trusted confidant, especially to Alexandra. She believed only he could save her son's life. But to the Russian nobility, Rasputin was a scandalous figure. He was rumored to be a drunkard and a womanizer, his behavior entirely unbecoming of a holy man. Aristocrats were horrified that the royal family seemed so dependent on him. Satirical newspapers mocked Rasputin's influence, portraying him as the puppet master controlling the throne. Nicholas, though uneasy, tolerated Rasputin for the sake of Alexandra. This decision would cost him dearly, as Rasputin became a symbol of corruption and decay in the monarchy. By the early 1910s, Russia remained restless. Industrial strikes erupted in major cities, peasants rioted in the countryside, and revolutionary groups grew in strength. Yet Nicholas still believed that his empire could weather the storm. Then, in 1914, came the spark that would ignite the world: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. Russia, bound by its alliance with Serbia, entered World War I against Austria-Hungary and Germany. Nicholas thought the war would unite his divided empire under patriotic fervor. At first, crowds cheered in the streets of St. Petersburg, But the reality of war would soon crush that optimism. The Russian army was vast, but poorly equipped and badly led. Soldiers marched into battle without enough rifles, ammunition, or even boots. Against Germany's modern, disciplined forces, Russia suffered catastrophic defeats, such as the Battle of Tannenberg in 1914, where over 100,000 Russian soldiers were killed or captured. The home front fared no better. As the war dragged on, food shortages, inflation, and fuel crises devastated ordinary Russians. The population endured long bread lines while soldiers returned from the front disillusioned and broken. Nicholas made a fateful mistake in 1915. He assumed personal command of the Russian army. Leaving the capital for military headquarters, he tied his reputation directly to the war effort. When the army failed, the blame fell squarely on him. Meanwhile, in the capital, governance fell increasingly to Alexandra and, by extension, Rasputin. Ministers were dismissed at her whim, appointments made based on Rasputin's advice. Rumors spread like wildfire that the German-born empress was secretly aiding her homeland, that Rasputin was sleeping with the Tsarina, that the monarchy was utterly corrupt. For many Russians, it became clear the Tsar had lost touch with his people. By 1916, even members of the royal court could no longer tolerate Rasputin's influence. A group of aristocrats, led by Prince Felix Yusupov, plotted his murder. In December, they lured Rasputin to Yusupov's palace with promises of wine and food. According to legend, they poisoned him, shot him, and finally drowned him in the icy Neva River. But the killing of Rasputin did not save the monarchy. Instead, it symbolized just how desperate and chaotic the empire had become. If the Tsar could not control his own court, how could he possibly control Russia? By early 1917, the situation was unbearable. Bread shortages pushed people into the streets of Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg. Strikes spread, and soldiers began refusing orders to fire on crowds. On March 2nd, 1917, under immense pressure from generals, ministers, and even family members, Nicholas II abdicated the throne. After more than 300 years of Romanov rule, the dynasty was finished. Nicholas believed he was sacrificing power for the good of Russia, but he was blind to how much hatred had built against him. Crowds celebrated in the streets. For many, it was not just the end of a reign, but the end of tyranny. Nicholas and his family were initially placed under house arrest. They lived in relative comfort at the Alexander Palace, though always under guard. Nicholas spent his time chopping wood and reading, seemingly at peace without the burdens of rule. But as the revolution radicalized, their situation worsened. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power in the October Revolution of 1917. For them, the Romanovs were dangerous symbols of the old order. In 1918, the family was moved to Yekaterinburg, deep in the Ural Mountains, to a house ominously renamed the House of Special Purpose. By July 1918, the Russian Civil War was raging. Anti-Bolshevik forces, the White Army, were advancing toward Yekaterinburg. Fearing that the Romanovs might be rescued, the local Bolshevik authorities decided to eliminate them. In the early hours of July 17, 1918, Nicholas, Alexandra, their 5 children, and loyal servants were awakened and led to the basement of the house. They were told they were being moved to a safer location. Instead, a squad of Bolshevik soldiers entered the room. Their commander, read a statement. The Romanovs were to be executed. Nicholas barely had time to say, "What? What is it?" before the firing began. The Tsar, his family, and their attendants were gunned down in a hail of bullets. Those who survived the first volley were bayoneted or shot at close range. The youngest daughter, Anastasia, reportedly lived longest, protected by jewels sewn into her clothing, but she too perished. The last Tsar of Russia, who once ruled over 130 million people, was gone. Nicholas II remains one of history's most tragic figures. Devoted as a husband and father, he was nonetheless a poor ruler, unprepared for the modern world. His stubborn belief in autocracy, his disastrous war leadership, and his reliance on questionable advisors like Rasputin all accelerated the downfall of the monarchy. Yet Nicholas's story is not only about failure. It is also a cautionary tale about the dangers of inflexible leadership, about how a ruler's personal choices can alter the destiny of an entire nation. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized Nicholas and his family as martyrs, honoring their piety and suffering. To some Russians, they are remembered as saints, to others as weak rulers who destroyed an empire. The life of Nicholas II is a story of contrasts, a man both gentle and stubborn, loving and naive, powerful and powerless. His reign began with promise but ended in catastrophe, swept away by the forces of revolution and modernity. From the glittering halls of the Winter Palace to the dark basement in Yekaterinburg, the journey of the last Romanov Tsar reflects the turbulent transformation of Russia itself. And so, with the gunfire of July 1918, the age of emperors ended, and a new, uncertain chapter of Russian history began. Thanks for watching, and if history inspires you, subscribe for more timeless stories every week.